Pastor Jesse and I have been in the middle of a series entitled Walking in Wisdom. Walking in Wisdom. And basically, if you've studied the book of Proverbs, you know that there are 17 subjects that Proverbs pretty well just jumps around and it covers. And this conversation is basically Solomon talking to his son Rehoboam. And as he talks to his son Rehoboam, he's giving him snapshots and he says, this is what you need to be successful in life. In Proverbs 22 and verse 29, amazing verse, it says, observe people who are good at their work. Boy, observe people who are good at their work. Skilled workers are always in demand and admired. They don't take a back seat to anyone. One of the things that was intriguing me was who is saying what and to who he is saying this. And this is Solomon. Now you have to understand at this time in the history of mankind, Solomon is the wealthiest individual on this planet. Nobody has had more and accumulated more than Solomon. In fact, he has reached a place that what's going on is that he has so much, they don't even count silver anymore. Now, for those of you that are young, that would be like us not counting coins anymore. They just literally left them outside the city in piles there. If you know anything about the price of silver right now, you don't want silver to just accumulate. It's of great value. But when you have so much that something's no longer valuable to you, that's interesting. But I'm thinking, here's a man who's going to leave his son so well off that this young man doesn't have to do anything the rest of his life. He doesn't have to do one thing. And yet, Solomon teaches him about work. Isn't that intriguing? Here's somebody who doesn't have to do one thing. He is positioned that he would never have to lift his finger. And yet, Solomon, his dad, says, I need to teach you how to work. And one of the things that I would say to every parent, there are two things you need to teach your kids. You need to teach them how to work and how to give. When you begin to step beyond the faith moment, you need to teach them how to work and how to give. And don't assume because they know you go off to work that they know how to work. And don't assume that because you give, they know how to give. I remember being in a meeting with Arthur Blanc. For those of you who may not know who he is, he was one of the two original founders of Home Depot. So they started the first Home Depot, added another Home Depot, another, and then there were thousands of them, and one day they sold the company. When they sold the company, the amount of income that they received was massive. But I remember being in a room where he made a statement. He says, I never give my kids money until I first teach them how to give. And so every one of his kids were required to become and work at their foundation that specialized in inner city areas where there was extreme poverty. And until they had seen the depth of need and learned how to give to people, he says, I'm never going to trust them with money. How many of you know somebody who built up a business and they gave it to their kids and their kids ran the business into the ground? It's because we assume everyone knows how to work and we assume everyone knows how to give. Well, one of the things that we're seeing here is that God looks at our lives from a different perspective than we do. We approach our lives like there's watertight compartments. There's these little areas of our life and they are sealed off and nothing can get in, nothing can bleed in. And so for many of us, it's our home life. Man, at our home life, that's our castle, that's our place. It is totally sealed off. And then for there's not only home life, but there's social life. You know, the extra areas of life where we're interacting and we're engaging with people. And so we have this home life, and it's sort of in a box. And we have this social life, and it's in a box. And then we have our professional life, our business, and it's in a box. And we keep them all separate. Man, this is home, and this is social, and this is professional. But they all integrate. And there's a common misconception. And the common misconception is this: there is Sunday, and then there's real life on Monday. Well, tomorrow I got to go do real life. And so we have this little box, and this little box is an hour and 15 minutes. This is the God box. God gets to be in. God, if you're going to do something, you've got an hour and 15 minutes, and in this God box is where you fit, and it doesn't bleed into anything else. Except God knows where you go on Mondays. God's not looking around and saying, where did they go? They were just here. I'm not sure where they're at. God knows where you go on Monday. Because what God wants you to know is He doesn't want you to have this life that is separate. He wants you to have this life that is integrated. And so what God says is, I know where you go. And here's the reason God knows where you go: because God created you to work. Someone says, that doesn't sound good. Why did God do that? Because God created you with a mission. He created you with a calling. He created you with a purpose. You were not put here by accident. You were put here for a strategic reason by God, and God created you to work. In Ephesians 4:28, but rather let him labor. Oh, labor, that's called work. But rather let him labor, working with his hands what is good, so that he may give. So it says, God created you to labor, to work, to do something that's good, so that you will be positioned to give. It says you were created. Someone says, well, I thought work was a part of the fall of man. I thought it was a part of the curse in Genesis 3. No, work was always a part of God's plan, because he created Adam and Eve to be fruitful, to multiply, to replenish this world, to take what was in the garden and began to take it and around the whole world, and they were going to work at that project. But what the curse did was the curse made work harder. And it says sometimes you're going to work and you're going to feel like you're not getting any results. And he says you're going to feel the sweat of your brow. But God created everyone to work. Everyone. It's not only that God created you to work, but God values your work. He puts a premium on it. For it says in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, for even when we were with you, we commanded you. This is a command, that if anyone will not work, neither shall they eat. Well, that's a tough command. He says that there's something of value here that I don't want you to miss, and you've got to be involved in this. So God creates you to work. God values your work, but God wants to be a part of your work. He says, whatever you do it heartily as unto the Lord. And so Solomon's teaching his son. He says, you're going to have more than you need, but I still need you to work. You could lay back, but you still need to go to work. You could just mail it in, but I still need you to go to work. I need you to work because God created you to work, because God values your work, and because God wants to be a part of your work. But then when you begin to wrap your arms around that, that brings some questions. Work, well, what is it? For some people, work is Toyota, going down there. For other people, it is going to JCPenney. For other people, it's going to Frito-Lay. For other people, it's going to Liberty Mutual. You name the locations right down the road here. Whatever it is, and they say, well, that's work. But God sees work a little bit differently. What he sees your work is your work is to be a place of worship. My work's to be a place of worship. You've never worked at Toyota, apparently. No, it's to be a place of worship. In fact, the way it becomes a place of worship is Proverbs 16 and verse 3. It says, commit your work to the Lord. Commit your work to the Lord, then it will succeed. Not wait till you fail and ask God to do something. He says, commit your work to the Lord. Let me give it to you this way. Pray your way to work, or you'll be praying for work. Pray your way to work. It's to be an act of worship. Do you know of your awake time, which for 3 of you isn't happening right now? But for your awake time, 29% of your life will be spent at work. Why would God save you and then say, there's a third of your life I want nothing to do with? You know how we have take your daughter to work, take your son to work? They even have take your pet to work. How about let God go to work with you? 29% of your life. See, your work is to be a place of worship where you just say, God, I'm committing this, I'm giving this to you. This is yours. This belongs to you. I'm committing my work to you. Then it will succeed. But if I go to work and I don't give it to you, it's probably not going to succeed. So I'm going to make it a place of worship. But it's not only that, but your work is to be a place of witness. It is to be a place of witness. In Proverbs chapter 11 and verse 30, it says, the fruit, the work of righteousness is a tree of life, and he who wins souls is wise. Do you know in this world right now, there are 7 billion people? 7 billion people. Do you know if you take everyone possible of any kind of various type of Christian faith, out of those 7 billion, 3 billion of them are Christians. Somewhere between 2.7 to 3 billion of them would be called Christians. That leaves 4 billion people. Now, let me tell you about that 4 billion people. Some of those, if you invited them, would come to church with you. But 53% of people will never go to any church. They're not going to walk in this church. They're not going to walk in any other church. They're just not going to go. So 53% of 4 billion people are not going to walk in a church. And that's not a surprise to God. God knew that. So you know what God did? He started putting people undercover. And he started disguising them as accountants, as plumbers, as electricians, as marketers. He started disguising them, and he says, you know what? You won't come to me, so I'm going to go to you, and I'm going to send people to you, and I'm going to put them undercover. They're going to look like salesmen. They're going to look like management. They're going to look like CEOs. They're going to look like this. They're going to look like that. But really, what they're there for is they're the closest that you will come to God. See, you're the closest some people are ever going to come to God. You're the closest. You're going to be the voice that they hear that's going to be God's. You're going to be the hands that they're going to see that are going to be God's. You're going to be the feet that are going to represent God. You're the closest, because God knew that 53% of them would not walk into a church. Therefore, as a result of that, he says, I'm going to put you there. I'm going to put you undercover, because they will never suspect you. They'll never think. And someone says, well, how do I do this undercover work? Do I stand on my desk and holler out, turn or burn? Hopefully not. Here's what you do, is you be a Christian. You act like a Christian. You respond, well, what if I fail? The next day, be a Christian. And you try to put together a string of days that you're just being a Christian. I've had people come to me and they said, Pastor, I need you to pray. I said, okay, what's going on? They said, you need to pray for my job. I said, what's going on with your job? And they said, where I work, I'm the only Christian. I don't know what to do. And they said, I need to pray that God gives me a job with other Christians. And I look at him and I said, I have that job, and it's not all that it's cracked up to be. I said, sometimes when you're around Christians all the time, you just take a good old sinner. But see, they don't understand that they've been put there undercover. Do you understand earth and heaven are not the same? In heaven, you're going to be around Christians. Down here, you get to be around sinners because God wants you to help them become Christians so they get to go to heaven. And so your work is to be a place of witness. It's where you just be a Christian. You're going to think a little bit different. You're going to talk a little bit different. You're going to do things a little bit different. You're going to help when other people don't help, and you're going to care when other people don't care, and you're going to pray when no one knows how to pray, and you're going to just do things that are a little different. So I guess my question is this: at your work right now, who did God put you there for? Who's the person? Who's the person that you're there for? I remember a dear friend of mine, he did an evangelism class on Sunday nights. And there was this man who came to this evangelism class, and this man, he had known him for 10 years, but during the 10 years he had known him, every time he asked him a question, the guy would just give him a yes or no answer. He said, how are you doing? And he would just sort of just stare at him, and then he'd ask him something, and it'd just be these one-word kind of answers. And then one day, this guy shows up in his evangelism class, and he's thinking, well, I don't know how I can teach this. This guy just speaks in single-syllable words, hi, bye, yes, no, that kind of thing. How's he going to do anything? But he was the most faithful one to the 8-week class, and he'd have his Bible out, and he'd be writing, and he had his notes out, and he'd be writing it, and he had. And then one day, this guy's wife ran into this man, and he said, I don't know if you've noticed, but my husband has been coming to your evangelism class. And he said, yeah, I've noticed. She said, I don't know if you noticed, but my husband doesn't speak a whole lot. He said, yeah, I've noticed that, you know. And he said, I've wondered how he's going to pull off this evangelism thing without speaking. And she said, well, he has a friend at work, and they drive 30 minutes to work every day. And this friend doesn't know Jesus, and he wants him to know Jesus. So he went through all of everything that was taught. One day, his friend got in the car. He was driving that day. He turned to him and he said, take this. It was a Bible. It had sticky notes on it. One here, one here, one here. He said, follow the sticky notes. And so for 30 minutes, the guy looked over and he could see his friend reading where each one of the sticky notes was. And he said when he got to the location of the parking lot at work, he looked over and his friend was praying the prayer with tears in his eyes. Who did God put you at your work for? Oh, but I'm supposed to perform. Yeah, you're supposed to perform for God. And God put you there for a reason. Your life's bigger. It's not watertight. God knew that some people are never going to come. And so your work is to be a place of wisdom. See, God knows how to do your job better than you do. And so God says, I want it to be a place of worship, that you give it to me. I want it to be a place of witness where there's people that I want to get into heaven and you're going to be their arms and legs, but I want you to be good at what you do. And so he says, learn so you can be better. Observe people who are good at their work. They're good at it. So learn. Just so you can be good. Someone says, well, we do technology. I think God can handle it. He took one drop of water and he balanced out the oceans. And he took one grain of sand and he balanced out the land. And I think if he could do that, say, well, we use supercomputers. He calls them really, really dumb computers compared to him. And he can sit there and he can do everything. But not only is your work to be a place of worship and a place of witness and a place of wisdom, but your work is to be a place of work. Someone says, what does that mean? It means you're going to work. See, I've heard this phrase, well, if you find something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. I've never met that person. I mean, it may be a great bumper sticker. At some place you've got to work. You got to do something. And so work is to be a place of work. And someone says, well, what does that mean? It's going to require some effort. It's going to need some discipline. Proverbs 23 and verse 12, develop a disciplined life. Be attentive so you can be well informed. Discipline. It's going to require some work. I can remember one day when my son Cody, who I love and admire, all of my kids, they're just so exceptional and they've just done so well. But Cody was the one that I navigated a lot of things with through life, just the nature of our relationship. And he called me one day and he was upset. And I just remember giving him what I call the Cody rules. Now, these Cody rules have literally made it all around the world. I have people who will text and call me and say, do you realize we just taught the Cody World rules to everyone in our company? Everyone, they're taught in management settings all over, repeatedly. But I said, Cody, I'm going to help you. I said, I'm going to teach you 5 things. If you do these 5 things, you'll come out better from college than most people ever come out from college. I said, these 5 things. I said, the first thing is just show up. Now, Cody's the second best worker I've ever seen in my life. But do you know why he's good? He shows up. Do you know why some people aren't good workers? Not because they couldn't be good workers. They just don't show up. They show up today. They don't show up tomorrow. They show up here and they don't show up there. I said, just show up. I said, Cody, if you learn to show up, you're going to beat 50% of the people in this world. Because most people don't know how to show up. And then I said, add this. If you do this, you're going to beat 60% of the people in this world. Show up on time. Show up on time. I said, when it's time, I said, whatever the workday starts at, show up on time. I said, it's not a suggestion. I believe punctuality is a fruit of the Spirit. I believe the only reason theologically that some people teach that there are multiple raptures is because most Christians couldn't make it on time for the first one. They just couldn't make it on time. So for most people, if the rapture was pre-trib, someone said, do you believe in pre-trib? But your guess is as good as mine. But let's say it is pre-trib. Half the Christians couldn't make it to pre-trib. So God's going to have to do a mid-trib one, because some people don't show up till halfway through. And then some people don't show up to the very end. We'll sometimes look up and someone's just walking in and we're saying, bow your heads. And we're going, what is this? And so some people are going to make it post-trib. You're going to get as much hell as you want based on whether you're willing to show up. But I said, Cody, just show up. But show up on time. And I said, when you show up on time, show up prepared. I said, understand that the first 15 minutes of your day isn't drinking coffee. Oh, snap. It's not about drinking the coffee. No. I said, Cody, if you show up, you beat 50%. If you show up on time, you beat 60%. If you show up prepared, you'll beat 70% of the people. And then I said, Cody, show up to do your best. You'll now beat 80% of the people. Someone says, well, I don't like my work. Here's the thing. Do your best. Well, I don't have all the resources. Do your best. You know what your best is, and you know if you're giving your best. You know your best. You know if you're mailing it in. You know if you're just going through the motions. I said, show up prepared, and show up to give your best. But I said, Cody, if you want to be in the top 10% of people in this world, show up and do it for God. Someone says, I don't like my boss. My boss is God. I've never worked for anyone other than God. Oh, you haven't worked a real job. No, I've never worked for anyone other than God. And really, you've never worked for anyone other than God. You may not want to put God in that position because God knows everything about you. But I said, if you show up on time, you show up prepared, you show up to do your best, and you show up for God, you'll be in the top 90%. Someone says, what is that? It's discipline. Just the ability. And so God looks at your work and he says, hey, your work is to be a place of worship. He says, hey, your work is to be a place of witness. Your work is to be a place of wisdom, and your work is going to be a place of work. But please remember why you work. You work to take God places God wouldn't get to go without you. I get to go into a lot of rooms that I honestly don't belong in, with high talented, gifted people. I was recently in one of these rooms. It had 70 people in it. Everyone in that room would have been an overachiever. Everyone in that room would have been a highly talented, gifted performer. Everyone. But there was one person in that room that was different than everyone else. And he was a billionaire. He had bought tech companies, sold tech companies, bought tech companies, sold tech companies. If you were to look at that room and you were to put the word success, he was the most successful person. Nobody had the income, no one had the resources. He was the most successful. But over 3 days, something's going to happen in that room. He's going to walk in being the most successful person. But then the person who's speaking is going to start talking about a journey. And the journey is going to go like this. This is how many kids we're going to help with education. This is how many lost people we're going to help get to heaven. This is how many nations we're going to help get from third world to second world. And this man's going to begin to hear all of this. And he's going to end up turning to that room and he's going to say this: I was the most successful person in the room, but I was the least significant person in the room. He had more money. He had made less difference. If you think money equals difference making, his whole ambition was to go play more golf, to go vacation more places, to go hunting whenever he wanted to go hunting, anywhere in the world. But in tears, I watched this guy say, I'm successful. I'm just not significant. People say, I don't get it. Here's the reason most people don't get the difference, is most Christians, that's what they want. They want success. God created you for significance. When you get to heaven, God's not going to ask you anything about your balance sheet. He's going to ask you about people. What did you do to change a person's life? What did you do to add value to a person's life? Oh, but God wants me successful. As long as you don't see it as the end game. God will give you success. Let me tell you a secret some people don't. The devil will give you money if you won't make a difference. He'll pay you a lot just to have a lake house. One day we'll stand before God. We commit our work to God. We'll have success, but will we have significance? Someone says, how do I get from success to significance? Add a word in between. Sacred. Do something that's sacred, that God values. So why do you work? To take God places. Who do you work for? Work for God. But if you work for God, there are 4 things you've got to do. Pray and invite him to work. Every day, just say, God, I'm going to work. Come with me. Come to work. Believe for his favor. You know how in 7th grade, if a certain person liked you, everyone else liked you? And how we never outgrow our 7th grade mentality? We think if this person likes us at work, everyone else is good. How about this? How about if you pray and ask God to bless you with favor? Because when God likes you, that's a whole lot of liking. Believe for his favor. Trust God to give you wisdom at work. That God will just give you wisdom. But most importantly, add this. Care about who God wants you to reach at work. Care about it. I know a lot of people who ask God to go to work. I know a lot of people who want God's favor at work and they want God's wisdom at work. But God wants you to care about who he sent you to for that work. Do that.